The sheriff had the padlock out when the woman came into the diner. It was June of 1958, Buffalo, Wyoming, on a Tuesday morning that already had the heat of July in it. The kind of town where the names on the storefronts had been the same for 30 years, and the diner on Main Street opened at 5:30, and the coffee had been burning since 5. Sheriff Ray Dempsey was a decent man. He would tell you that himself, and the people of Johnson County would not disagree with it. And he had the eviction paperwork in a manila folder and a padlock in his coat pocket. And his job that morning was to work through the addresses on Harney Street one by one, confirm the notices, and secure the properties whose tenants had already cleared out. He had been to 3 houses by the time the woman arrived. In a corner booth by the front window, a man in a tan Stetson and a canvas jacket with the sleeves rolled to the forearms was watching. Here is the story. Ruth Calloway had lived in the house at 14 Harney Street for 12 years. She and Carl moved in during the fall of 1946. When Carl came back from the Pacific with his discharge papers and $42 and a welding certification he intended to put to use at the rail yard. They painted the porch floor gray that November, 2 coats, Carl on his knees in the cold, and furnished the kitchen with the things her mother had boxed and sent from Laramie and hung a radio on the shelf by the window. The house smelled of coffee in the mornings and lye soap on Saturdays, and in the evenings the radio played, and you could hear the neighbors through the walls, which in those days was a comfort and not an inconvenience. They had a son in 1946. They named him Daniel. Carl called him Dan. Carl re-enlisted in 1949. They needed the money, and Carl knew the work, and there was no other life he had ever trained himself for. He was assigned to the 1st Marine Division. He shipped out in September of 1950 and was killed at the Chosin Reservoir in late November of that year, in temperatures below 30 below zero, alongside the rest of his unit, holding a supply road so that the wounded could be brought out. He was 28 years old. Danny was 4. Ruth stayed. She paid the rent, $48 a month, with wages from her position at Hendrickson's Dry Goods on Main Street. 6 days a week at the linen counter, 9 to 5. She did this for 7.5 years. She kept Danny in school, and the porch step painted the same shade of gray Carl had chosen, and the coffee can of geraniums alive through 3 Wyoming winters. She mailed every envelope on the 1st of every month to a man named Eldon Marsh, who owned all 8 houses on Harney Street and lived in Cheyenne, and had in 12 years never once set foot on the block. Harney Street was modest by any standard, 8 frame houses on a block and a half, all built in the same decade, painted white or cream, with the same narrow lots and the same pattern of front porches and side yards. There was a Larson family at number 4, and a Betancourt family at number 9, and a retired railroad man named Hooks at number 11, who kept a victory garden he shared with the street every August. There was a widow at number 14, with a coffee can of geraniums on the porch, and a gray porch step, and a son with his father's baseball glove. In April of 1958, Eldon Marsh sold the entire block to a Denver real estate corporation called Whitmore Land Company for $62,000. The development plans called for the block to be cleared and the ground broken for a parking structure serving a new hotel on the county highway. The notices went out on May 15th. The deadline was June 14th. Ruth had gone to the bank. The bank was polite about it, and the form did not help. She had called the housing office in Cheyenne from the diner on Main Street. It was the only line she could reach that week, her party line having already been disconnected by the new property manager, and the housing office was in a board meeting and would return calls the following week. When she pushed through the door of the diner on Tuesday morning, Danny was outside on the sidewalk in his school clothes, holding a baseball glove that had his father's name on the heel in black marker. The glove was too big for his hand. It had always been too big. She made her call. She reached the same operator she had reached twice before, and was given the same message. The diner had gone quiet by the third sentence. Lola, 16 years at that counter, set the coffee pot on the ledge and did not move. Two truckers at the far end had their cups halfway to their mouths and did not finish the movement. Nobody looked at Ruth directly. That was the particular courtesy of the time and the place. You did not stare at a woman absorbing a loss in public. You looked at the counter. You looked at your hands. Ruth put the receiver down and said, quietly, that she understood. She did not sit down. She stood at the telephone shelf with her hand still on the cradle and looked at nothing for a moment. Through the plate glass window, you could see the house at 14 Harney Street. You could see the two chairs on the porch and the coffee can of geraniums, and the gray paint on the porch floor, two coats that Carl had put down in November of 1946. The front door was still standing open from when she had left that morning. The curtain in Danny's bedroom window, the one she had made from feed sacks the winter Carl died, moved once in the draft from the door and then went still. Sheriff Dempsey would reach number 14 before 10 o'clock. The man in the corner booth had his coffee cup in his hand and had not put it down. If you've ever watched someone absorb that kind of loss without making a sound, you know what that diner felt like. Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. Then, Danny came through the door.